Namaste and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan. US billionaire who's Hungarian born or has Hungarian roots, George Soros, has come out in the open with his intent to go ahead and take on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, because from George Soros' perspective, he is a nationalist. Ladies and gentlemen, the West's definition of nationalist and how we look at the word nationalist is very different. They look at the word nationalist from the prism of fascism, and it's driven through Hitler's ideology. But for us, nationalist or nationalism is another way of looking at being a patriot, patriotism, putting the country first. It's not about only my country and no one else. It's about always Bharat first. That means for me personally as an individual or every Bharatiya, Bharat comes first. Now, that's one aspect. The other point is that he has a political leaning and a thought process, and he believes that India is not democratic. Is that not an outright insult of the mandate of the people of this country, who of their own free will, exercising their own free will, have elected a political party and also a leader to lead them over the past 8 years? These are all questions that remain. But here's what the billionaire has come out and said. He has made the charge that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is silent on the Adani crisis, and that he believes that he will have to answer foreign investors. Is the nonagenarian not aware that only yesterday or the day before, the leaders of 3 big countries thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the $80 billion plus deal with Airbus and Boeing is actually going to generate jobs in nations, one of which is also Mr. Soros' home now. So if investors were not wanting to invest in India, would India have the kind of growth that it has? And if India is not growing and if India is not prospering, would India have the kind of money to invest in developed nations abroad? Now, are these facts not there in his cognizance, or he does what, or has he decided to ignore them because he believes that PM Modi has to go? India is currently not a democracy. Institutional reforms have not happened. That's his opinion. Do you agree with such an opinion living in Bharat? We leave that to you. But here's what the government has come out and done. The government, or the principal party leading the government at the center, that's the BJP, has come all guns blazing. So Union Minister Smriti Irani took the stage and then attacked George Soros. He triggered a fresh storm where he accused PM Modi of crony capitalism. The centre hit back and said, intend to demonize and break India. The Modi and Adani are close allies. Mr. Soros has made this charge. Can he prove it in a court of law with facts? We have to wait and watch if somebody asks him to prove this charge. But the centre has hit back saying that Soros' imperialist mindset now stands exposed. PM Modi is silent on the Adani crisis is what George Soros' charge. Irrespective of the fact, on this very platform, on your channel, you have the country's finance minister who has responded on the Adani issue. That has escaped his attention. But the agent of regime change and wants a favourable government is what the centre has turned around and said, that he is here to topple a particular government which is elected by a majority of the voters in our country. Modi must answer foreign investors. He invested $1 million to target Modi. That's the charge of the centre. The centre has also said that democracy in India is strong and resilient. It's not an elected autocracy as some people want to coin it. On what terms, we do not know. We are vibrant with more than 44 parties somewhere or the other part of government within the states. And of course, at the centre, expect a democratic revival in India is another point of view that Soros is saying, that he believes there is no democracy in our country. So plenty of charges that have been made by Mr. George Soros, but the centre coming out all guns blazing, like I said, not wanting to take it lying down anymore. Listen into what Smriti Irani ji said.
George Soros, an international entrepreneur who hedges bets against many countries, has now declared his ill intentions to intervene in the democratic processes of India. Such is a time where the imperialistic intentions of an entrepreneur come to light, brings an onslaught to the economy of India, all so that he can personally. Those who support Mr. Soros need to know that democracy has prevailed in India and will continue to do so.
Now let me tell you George Soros' links in Bharat. First up is an NGO called Namati. Now Namati is based in Washington. George Soros and Nobel laureate Amartya Sen are part of the NGO's advisory council. Just a reminder of Amartya Sen, who has said as recently as January 2023, while referring to, I quote, an atmosphere of intolerance, unquote, in India, he said it won't last long. In the past, he has asked people to come together to vote the BJP out. Then, there is the link to Harsh Mandar. He is the head of a research group and is also a social activist, probably best known for being part of the National Advisory Council under the UPA. Harsh Mandar has served as an advisory board member at OSF from 2020 to 2022. Remember, Harsh Mandar is linked to violence around Jamia in December 2019 and also the anti-CAA protests into 2019 and 2020. Basharat Peer is a writer and author. He served as the Open Society Fellow between 2009 and 2010. Basharat Peer in 2010 wrote, and I quote, Indian troops killing Kashmiri protesters. Lawyers Collective, an NGO headed by Indira Jaising and Anand Grover. FCRA license of the Lawyers Collective was cancelled over donations from George Soros. They allegedly received donations of over 4 crore rupees. But the Congress's stand on George Soros seems to be either divided or somewhere on the lines of confused. We'll tell you why. Congress media cell head Jairam Rameshji tactfully tried to distance the party from George Soros and his designs. He said that whether the Adani issue sparks a democratic revival in the country depends entirely on the grand old party and other opposition parties, and it has nothing to do with the billionaire investor George Soros. But another party face and close aide of Rahul Gandhi, Praveen Chakravarti, seemed to promote George Soros' views. And when it comes to the Gandhi scion himself, Rahul Gandhi was seen with George Soros' aide Salil Shetty during his Bharat Jodo Yatra. But this isn't the first time George Soros has spoken on India and also taken a position against Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In January 2020, George Soros pledged $1 billion for Global University. University was formed to, quote, fight nationalists, unquote, which they may term as authoritarian. George Soros has accused Prime Minister Narendra Modi of creating Hindu nationalist state. That's his interpretation. And he said this in the past. Indian government had put the OSF, the Open Society Foundation, on watch list in 2016. The foreign donor was put under the watch list or prior permission category in 2016, but it moved the High Court only in Jan 2020. Jan 2020 is soon after the developments of August 2019 and the 3-4 instances which came to fore, big laws which were brought in, and then they moved court. But is George Soros a threat only to India? Or has he meddled with affairs of nations across the world? In November 2015, Russia has banned George Soros under the OSF, and George Soros funded OSF, saying it posed a threat to both state security and the Russian constitution. In December 2017, the Pakistan government accused George Soros Foundation and other groups of anti-state activities, forcing them to shut down their operations there as well. In November 2018, OSF closed its operations in Turkey after President Erdogan said Soros was trying to divide and destroy nations. In 2018, OSF closed its operations and moved operations out of Budapest after Hungarian parliament passed a Stop Soros law that makes it illegal to help undocumented migrants. So, George Soros has meddled in the affairs in various nations. He has an agenda and he has come out in the open about it, sparking a storm. But is the BJP's allegation that there is a Congress Soros tango at play, does that hold merit? Let's get into the face-off. Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, is with us. Saira Shah Halim, writer and activist, is also with us. Namaste and Jai Hind. Thank you very, very much. Meddling in the affairs of a country, he's put out his cards openly. He's been on the watch list since 2016. Why is the BJP waking up to George Soros now, Sanju Verma?
Anand, let's be very clear that in June 2020, when George Soros actually petitioned the Supreme Court after the Modi government, said that his Open Society Foundation, which was founded by George Soros in 1984, is not complying with FCRA norms and is under a watch. George Soros moved the apex court in India, saying that he is being targeted and vilified. To say that the Modi government has woken up now, incorrect. Point number one. Point number two, if you are doing business in India, whether you are an NGO or a commercial enterprise, you have to abide by Indian laws. And George Soros has repeatedly failed to do that, even in his own country, Hungary. As we all know, before becoming this American billionaire, he was a Hungarian Jew. I just have this to say. Look at Harsh Mandar, who was a part of the advisory board of Open Society Foundation, which is basically a George Soros run firm. And Harsh Mandar was also, during the Congress-led UPA, a part of the NAC, the National Advisory Council, which was the highest apex body in terms of the Congress organizational affairs. So there is a clear link. Harsh Mandar is the common link between the Congress party's NAC and George Soros, his firm, Open Society Foundation. Now, as you pointed out, be it Indira Jaisingh's firm, Lawyers Collective, be it Namati, a so-called NGO run by Amartya Sen, which also has a link with George Soros, or for that matter, Indian American Muslim Council. If you remember, in Jan 2022, Hamid Ansari, the ex-vice president who served India as a vice president for 10 long years, he attended a meet organized by IAMC, an Indian American Muslim Council. Who are its backers? Its backers and funders are Jamaat-e-Islami, Lashkar-e-Toiba and ISIS. And Indian American Muslim Council under the UAPA in India has been banned. And what did Hamid Ansari say? Hamid Ansari says minorities in India have no rights. Democracy has flown out of the window. And Hamid Ansari is a career congressman. So again, you cannot deny the Congress and Soros links.
But what is the IAMC link with George Soros?
The IAMC link with George Soros is this, that IAMC also funds a body called United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, and Anurima Bhargav, who is currently the vice president of USCIRF, is an ex-George Soros fellow. She used to work for the Open Society Foundation before she moved to USCIRF, and USCIRF has very close links with Indian American Muslim Council, which in turn has very close links with Hamid Ansari, who in turn has close links and continues to be a Congress acolyte.
So everybody is linked to each other, but there are people in social life and people in public life can wear multiple hats. Does that mean that each hat has to be linked with the other? Let me just bring in Saira Shah Halim, allow her opening remarks, and then we can take the debate forward. Yes, Saira ji.
Yeah, hi Anand ji. Good evening.
Namaste. Are there entities in India who are being funded by George Soros or who are towing the narrative that he wants to set for Bharat?
See, I think it's really amusing that when any personality, a billionaire or somebody who, is concerned about world affairs, talks about corruption, talks about financial scams, the entire Bharatiya Janata Party spokesperson are out there just to defend a scam or just to defend any corruption charges. Now tell me one thing. How does a simple statement that George Soros said that turmoil engulfing Gautam Adani's business empire may open a door to a democratic revival in the country, how is that an anti-India attack? Or how is he an enemy of India? He is simply expressing an opinion. And here we are having long explanations from cabinet ministers on how he did this, how he did that, how he made it into the world affairs of India. I mean, right from Rihanna to climate change activists to Greta Thunberg Thunberg, BBC, now everybody has become, suddenly interested in India. I think it's a little far-fetched and people are hyperventilating and imagining things too far. Because here I'm treating again, whether it is George Soros, whether it is BBC, whether it is Greta Thunberg, whether it's Rihanna, everybody is entitled to an opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't think that our country is so small that any foreign power can come and undermine its democracy or try to belittle us or try to weaken our democracy.
But what happens is, I welcome that. I welcome that thought, and I welcome the fact that India is so strong and so big that one entity cannot do anything. But when there are people within our own country who want to latch on with such entities and not challenge the misinformation, when you believe it is okay for a British national to sit in Gujarat and pass an opinion about what's happening in our country and go and push forward a report, and nobody questions who are they to come into our country and do a report, with whose permission did they do it, then there are questions that come to mind. But Sanju Verma, how is one entity going to define the shape of this country? So that means that the voter of this country is pointless. Let's all let the government focus on the George Soroses of the world. Why focus on the voters of this country? Why focus on those? So if George Soros says there is no democracy in India, does that mean there is no democracy in India? Why give him so much bhav?
Anand, the point here is not about giving bhav. The point here is simply this, that एक लक्ष्मण रेखा होती है, as long as you don't cross that Lakshman Rekha, it is fine. Let us be very clear. Be it the Pegasus matter, be it the Shaheen Bagh riots, be it the Bhima Koregaon riots, be it coming out with a report saying that India is as autocratic as Pakistan and the economy is worse than Bangladesh. This was a report by Human Rights Watch, which is a firm funded by George Soros. It is a self-declared Human Rights Watch firm. It clearly says there is no democracy in India. George Soros has committed in June 2020 saying that a nationalist government led by Prime Minister Modi, it is time to uproot it. So the point is that this is a man who has meddled in the international affairs of various countries. Point number two, how can it be a coincidence that George Soros and Shashi Tharoor are great friends, is a statement by Shashi Tharoor in 2009. George Soros and Harsh Mandar, who was a part of Sonia Gandhi's NAC, are great friends. George Soros and Indira Jaising, who has always written, long stories about Modi government's undemocratic so-called ethos, are great friends. How is it that George Soros and Indira Jaising's husband, Mr. Grover, are great friends? How is it that George Soros also backed Sweden's V-Den report in 2022, which said India mein to democracy khatre mein hai? It is the same George Soros who funded a report in 2021, which was carried out by the US-based Freedom House entity, which again said democracy khatre mein hai. Are you telling Anand that we should simply sit quiet and twiddle our thumbs while this man, who himself in a famous interview, 10 seconds, in 1998, on 60 Minutes CBS to Steve Croft, he said, I am a businessman. My only motive is to make money. I do not care about the social consequences of what I do commercially. This is George Soros on record to CBS.
Correct.
Anchor Steve Croft. So why should we not call out the bluff of this man?
No. Calling him out is okay. Calling him out, you're calling him out. But are you actually countering him by calling him out? Because he's funding what you are alleging to be academic misinformation and pushing out a particular narrative and trying to prop it up with certain aspects of credibility, because he's saying, oh, this report says this report says the same thing, I am saying the same thing, and 10 other people say the same thing. He said that's my set agenda. So Saira Shah Alim, my question here before I come back to you, Saira Shah Alim, the simple point is, are there people in our country who for a few dollars are willing to sing a tune which they know is wrong, but it's going to get them money and get them limelight and get them audiences across platforms across the world and make them big stars?
I'll just say one thing. Is it a crime to question Mr. Adani's financial scam?
Not at all.
And it is very apparent who Mr. Adani is linked to. I mean, who is the person who is protecting him, or rather, who is the person who has been his godfather all along? So I think it is really disturbing, the BJP spokesperson, just because Mr. Soros asked some tough questions, and right through all his
let me ask you something. Do you believe that Bharat can do without private entrepreneurs?
And I think that is so tragic.
Saraji, apologies for interrupting you. My question to you is, do you believe that Bharat can do without private entrepreneurs, without the private sector? So every time the private sector does well, they do well only because of crony capitalism or because they are hand in gloves with the government. So is that what you're going to say about the Tatas? Is that what you're going to say about Wipro? Is that what you're going to say about the Birlas? Is that what you're going to say about the Ambanis, the Adanis, any and every private sector which has created jobs, created wealth and helped in the progress of this country? Are they all because of patronage of the government? So are you grudging Indian corporate its growth?
No.
Are you grudging Indian corporate and the Indian private sector?
I'm simply saying, see, I don't know what, aren't we as responsible, conscious citizens?
Correct. You please tell me what has happened in the stock market, and that too what has happened because of a report created internationally and the shorts in the New York Stock Exchange and its ripple down effect. How is that a scam, and where is the charge to prove that it is a scam, and where is the charge to prove that it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi who is protecting Gautam Adani? My point is, please make the charges. Where are you backing it? And who is and I'm telling you, ma'am, shouldn't it irk you and shouldn't it irk me? It's our business internally. But who is a George Soros to turn around and tell me that my vote doesn't count? Who's a George Soros to tell you that your vote doesn't count? Here's a George Soros to tell you in what kind of a country we are living in. He doesn't even come to India, ma'am.
I get you, Anand. If you could just allow me to speak. Anand, all fair. What I'm saying is, here, why did PM Modi campaign for Mr. Trump? Abki baar, Trump ki sarkar. Isn't that meddling in the internal affairs of the United States?
No, Trump.
I mean, here, everybody has a right to opine. Everybody has an opinion about world affairs. And here, the Hindenburg report clearly exposes Mr. Adani's financial scams. Look at it, the stock market reports. Look at how he is told the public.
But my point is, Saraji, just like you have an opinion and you will publish a report. Saraji, just like you have an opinion, Hindenburg has put there a report, but they have also come back.
No, but
the Adanis have also.
Anandji,
please understand.
It is not an opinion. It is a clear fact.
See, I'll tell you. Are you going to be blinded that my opinion matters? Are you trying to say that your opinion matters, mine doesn't? Only your point of view matters, mine doesn't. If somebody, you're making a charge at somebody and that person has come with a defense, are you not going to give any credence to that defense? Are you going to also turn around and say that our financial watchdog, our banks, which are in a far more robust state today than they were even 8 years ago, they don't have the common sense to say how much they are lending and they will put the financial health. So that's a different argument altogether. I'm just saying we should sort this out amongst ourselves. Who's an international person, a billionaire sitting somewhere else? Is he going to decide what we're going to do as a country? And 1 minute. I have to wind up. I'm way over. But Sanju Verma, here's the question. You're sitting, or the government sitting there and lampooning George Soros in a press conference, or you sitting here on the right stand. Is that going to sort matters out? Or are you going to counter narrative setting with a counter narrative setting or with facts? What are you going to do to go ahead and tell the world that George Soros has been taking everyone for a royal ride? Banning him, is it going to stop him from doing what he's doing?
Anand, let me be very clear that narrative setting and ensuring that the intellectual cover fire that is given by the likes of Soros and Hamid Ansari to terror organizations like Indian American Muslim Council. We need to fight the narrative bit. We will also take concrete action on the ground. And let me tell one more thing to the other panelist who was saying, a Hindenburg report is the gospel of truth. And, Adani is a criminal. Let us be very clear. There is the RBI, there is the SEBI, there is the registrar of companies to see if stock market or company related violations have been done. I have a problem when people talk about Adani but don't realize that between 2004 and 2014, when the Congress was in power, Adani's stock price went from 24 rupees to 497, which is
like I said, ma'am,
2000% jump.
Sanjuji.
Wait, Anand, please.
Sanjuji, you have made this point. You have made this point in the past. Please hear me out. No, it is not about how much their stock price went up, ma'am. It is a fact that we need the private sector.
Adani made bigger gains under the
No,
Congress.
there is no
His
logic
stock
to this.
price went up by
Let's not.
2,000%.
For somebody who's come from the private sector into politics, may I request to Sanjuji, let us come back and understand this, that Bharat needs the private sector. Bharat needs the private sector to create the jobs, create the wealth, create the opportunity and fuel the growth. No, my point is, see, we can have our politics. I have to wind up. My simple point is criticizing and calling out George Soros is not enough. If you believe that he is setting an agenda against this country and its leader, then we have to do something concrete about it. Either take him to court, sue him, or go ahead and put out a narrative that doesn't defame Hindutva, that doesn't defame patriotism the Bharat way, that doesn't defame or perhaps allow a narrative which we believe is not helping us overall. I have to move on, ladies and gentlemen.